Okay, good morning, everybody, and those who are watching. We have David Hall with us. There is a new draft of this bill with very minor changes, I think. And we're going to try and walk through the changes that, as opposed to going through the whole bill, let's focus on the areas where changes. And I don't know, we may want to revisit in its entirety the apprenticeship section, because we did that fairly quickly yesterday. And I've had some further conversations with Joan Goldstein, and there are a couple of minor changes on the two big economic pieces here. So David, why don't you pull up your screen or whatever you magic you do. Let's go down to the last section of the bill.
Hello.
Hello, we're just about to start on apprenticeships.
Oh, great. I'm sorry. My computer was having a heart attack trying to get, I don't know how to show the, anyway, I apologize.
Okay. I already see, David, that I should have been more specific. When I added up the numbers of the appropriations, they added up to not quite $2 million. And I asked David to make the changes in this section. And maybe he can explain to me. The numbers now add up to $2 million, but yet there's an 8% set aside for administrative costs. So is that okay? Because each one of these things say not more than, or do we have to allow for the 160,000 in administrative costs in the $2 million number?
Yeah, it's up to you. I mean, if the good side of this construct is that they get the flexibility to, use the money and pull the administrative costs out of the total pot. The downside is, you're not telling them to specifically use X dollars for Y purpose, so that they could kind of freely move some of this money around if they wanted to.
That's a good point. Yeah, I like this construct that you came up with. I'm a little nervous that under this, they could potentially shut out one of these areas in its entirety. I guess another way to do it would be to, you could say no less than and no more than. I guess we just have to put our trust in that the legislative intent here is to break up this money in these proportions. These are the numbers that they gave us in the proposed budget. So, okay. Are people following that conversation in terms of, we just had numbers that didn't add up before to $2 million. Now we have these three pots of money plus administrative, and if everything went to its maximum, we would be spending 2.16. So, but they will have to save some money from these maximums in areas that they choose. I'm okay with that. Okay, let's go down. Yes, Senator Ram.
It's on this section, but different than what you were just saying.
Okay, well, you want to, well, we can all read it. So why don't you go ahead?
Well, I just didn't know if others felt similarly to I did yesterday about $750 not being that much, if with the allocation that's there, unless there's 500 people that are going to seek this voucher, it feels like you could be more generous with the voucher, because I'm just trying to get a sense of how many people are going to take this voucher.
Part of me feels like we can't micromanage this. I mean, we don't know how many people will take advantage of it. This may actually be, this is more than anyone's being offered at the moment. And so, I mean,
What did Sarah say in response to that question?
Yeah,
I
I'd love to
I
know.
think it's a fair point. If they're using $375,000 and they start getting hit up for legitimate expenses of more than 750, should we give them the freedom to spend more? I don't know whether, are you Senator Clarkson saying that what Sarah said was this is more than they
Well,
now?
this is they don't usually get anything for, I mean, they get some help. I guess I'd have to know from Sarah what they normally provide through DOL in terms of assistance for books and things. I know they give something, but this, I don't know if this is double the amount, or, I mean, I don't have anything to compare it to.
This is an important piece. I think this is an incentive to bring new people in.
Yes.
Right.
So I think it's a
Yeah.
fair point. Nathan, can you
Yeah.
see if you can track Sarah down, and we'll come back to this?
I don't want to, and I turned off my video because my internet's a little unstable. I don't want to put words in Sarah's mouth. I think what she started to say is that some people might need work boots and some people might need a very expensive piece of equipment. So this might be kind of the median, but not the mean, if that makes sense. It might, like, some people might need less, but for folks who are becoming a machinist or something, they might need a more flexible cap upward to give that person, something that actually makes a dent in becoming a really skilled technician.
I mean, I trust Sarah to have thought this through as to what the cap should be, but I want to hear her explain that.
Yeah.
Right. I guess that's sort of how I feel, is I mean, Keisha may be right, but it also may be, actually, this may be good. I just don't have any notion.
Okay. So let's go down further, David.
Okay, I'm gonna go back. I'm logging out and coming back in.
So these are two changes that we talked about a little bit yesterday. I asked David to make, and I think they're pretty important. We want this money to go as far as possible. That's subsection 1. And in the body of C, I think we talked about, we don't want, to the fullest extent possible, I don't know if this is too rigid, we don't want this money to just subsidize employers that are otherwise, have a history or otherwise have paid for some of these expenses to do apprenticeships. We want this to attract new workers and new apprenticeship where they might not otherwise come forward. I think this language, this is the first I'm seeing this language myself. I don't know what other people feel. I mean, is that an alternative to that language should say something, and this is lay term, not legislative language, shall to the fullest extent feasible or possible expend the funds available in this section? Or should we just leave it the way it is?
Well, I guess the only question I have is if you have some employer-funded apprenticeship opportunities, it's because there's a need for them. And
Right.
Universally, people are saying we can't find enough workers. And I would just be concerned that would this kind of continue the problem that we have by diverting money from places that really need those workers and apprentices, and despite the employer contributions, still haven't been able to get enough.
Yeah, I don't want to do that, but on the other hand, I don't want, it's a nuanced situation. I just don't want an apprenticeship program that's, for instance, working fine, has a long track history of filling 10 slots per year by a business, and a business, has been doing that all along. And now all of a sudden this money becomes available. And instead of it going to another business that wants to do something, or another area that needs workers, and this money be used as an incentive to get them into internships or on the job training or apprenticeships, now all of a sudden the business that has been going along smoothly sucks up the money and we don't achieve our goal.
I think you'd have to have Sarah address those concerns, because my understanding is this is I think we need Sarah. I don't think we can assume things. I think we should hear from Sarah how this will be additive and not detrimental in any way. I can't imagine that this would be. I would think this would be helpful for the line workers, for example. I mean, DOL is partnering with VTC on a number of these apprenticeships, and we have money in the budget for this. I think this could only be additive and help.
Well, I think we all agree that that's a goal, but this may be too tightly drawn. I mean, maybe
Yeah, it may be.
we set an intent or something and leave it to the agency to try and design the program in some way. We're doing that, for instance, on the recovery grants. We're saying that, if you are likely to get money from another source, don't come to us, so we can have more money remaining for the people who don't have that ability or opportunity. So this is sort of a mini version of that in a way. I feel strongly that the intent should be there. I'm not, this is sort of,
It's too prescriptive, maybe.
that's what I'm saying. It could be too,
Yeah.
too prescriptive.
I would agree. I would let the department which does well on these programs, I would let them do it. And I would tend to be a less prescriptive, but it's.
All right, so maybe, so we have those two issues out there.
I'll text Sarah and see if she's available.
I thought
Had we
Nathan,
booked her in for this morning? Did she know we were doing
I
apprenticeships?
can't recall. If I didn't, that's my fault. I think Nathan already tried to reach her, but
I've already reached out to her. No response yet.
okay.
Did you say you're texting her?
I am
Okay.
doing it right now.
Anything else people see in this section that that looks objectionable?
Nope.
Okay, so let's go back, if we could, David, why don't you just take over now and start from where the first changes are. There's not too many, I don't think, in the rest of the bill.
You just mean blue changes, so just stuff you haven't seen before?
Let's do the blue changes, yes.
Okay. I will maybe avert your eyes from the screen for a moment.
Oh,
Lest
yeah,
you
'cause it'll
get
be
a headache
like a
from
roller coaster.
scrolling.
Ah.
Okay, I think we're almost there.
Page 19.
I didn't see anything on 19.
Okay, it was just the last pause you did. Trying to keep
Sorry.
up.
Look at the bottom of page 22.
Yeah, got it. Oh. Mr. Chair, I got an answer from Sarah. She says her team is presenting right now, available at 11, trying to see if would.
Could you ask her if she could make herself available for 5 minutes? And we'll get
Yep.
her the questions we want answered in advance, or we can write something to her and have her answer in writing. but
That
just
may be a
I-
good idea.
5 minutes would be great.
I'm asking.
Okay. Okay, this is what you were asking about before, Senator Ram. Does that work for you? Maybe we've lost Senator Ram.
I didn't realize I was muted. No, no, sorry. I was just,
The data
Talk.
collection piece.
yes, yeah,
Happen-
that. Here's the voluntary piece, yeah. So
Yeah.
there's still a question about, does it need to be defined in statute or can they use the working federal definition? But this works for the voluntary piece.
Okay. Was there other changes, David? I can't remember.
Um, don't want to miss anything. Oh, yep. So you wanted to add to the capital seed fund report how they did, what were the results on their efforts to prioritize sourcing and funding to BIPOC, veteran, and women-owned businesses.
And that's
Okay.
page 26.
That's pretty self,
Ish.
that's
Yeah,
pretty
that-
self-explanatory. We asked them to do that and we're asking them to report back on their success.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I have any changes until here.
Okay. This was something that was raised by Tom Cavett. We did put in, I don't know if we did this in a previous draft, but the ACCD asked to add the executive economists have a right to access to this information as well.
right.
So that's pretty straightforward. I do have,
That, oh, yes, right. In the
I do have
executive.
one other change that I discussed with Joan on the economic recovery grants, but let's keep going. Okay, so that's it for changes. The one other change is in subsection 1 here, when we set the value of the grant, if you recall, originally the agency's position was, or the department's position was, that once you were found eligible, you'd either get 3 months of fixed cost or $150,000, the lesser of the two. And they were interpreting that as being you get one or the other, even if you had a very small business loss, you could still potentially get $150,000. In an effort to make this money go further, I think this was a comment from the auditor, but I had even raised this earlier myself. Why, if we're getting into this concept of loss or adjusted loss, why, and we have that number for eligibility, why can't that be the ceiling of the grant? And so we had put it in as adjusted tax loss. Joan says that could be confusing. And if you look at their, and I've gone through in detail their guidelines, which are good, they do this. They will have the lesser of these three amounts. But she says in statute, she would rather see the term net adjusted loss rather than adjusted tax loss. And I don't have any problem with that. We can continue to talk about it, but she said that the term would be confusing to her with the guidelines that they have put out so far. So sort of a technical correction. Okay. So let's, we have some time, and this is a big bill. So uh, I would like to use that time until we hear from Sarah to walk through, if you can stomach it, the bill in its entirety one time. David, you can lead us in that, and you don't have to,
Okay.
go through everything in
Chair,
detail, but just refresh our memory what these sections do. And
Mr. Chair, I've
Yeah.
got an answer from Sarah.
Okay.
She says, okay, can you send questions? I can multitask, but can't leave the presentation. What's the deadline?
Okay.
So,
So do you want to try to do that, Allison?
just
There are two questions.
hold on.
Uh,
If you guys would just quickly summarize the questions again, I'm typing
Okay,
as
the questions are in subsection C of the bill. Uh, do they feel that's too prescriptive, and should we turn it into more aspirational language? And then above that was the question on the $750. Would they like more flexibility there, or do they prefer sticking with a fixed cap? Or they like to see the cap higher?
a fixed cap.
They
or
like to
more-
or they like to raise the allowable amount or get greater flexibility, or are they comfortable leaving it at $750?
Yeah, okay, great. I'll get those. Those are the only two at the moment.
I think so.
Okay.
All right, just, I want to make a command decision to go through this bill again, but if people have real aversion to that, let me know. Otherwise,
No.
we'll walk through the whole bill. Okay.
We'd like to begin at the beginning.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I never identified myself to you. I'm your attorney, or one of them, David Hall, Legislative Counsel. This is H 159, an act relating to community and economic development and workforce revitalization. Prepared this as a strike all amendment from your committee, which does have possession of the bill. This is draft 8.1. This version on your screen, which is posted for today, includes highlights. The yellow highlights are changes that you are proposing to make to the House language. And then there was also some blue highlighting, which again is further changes you have made as a result of your discussions yesterday and the day before. So you'll remember on tourism and marketing, this began with an administration proposal to create a permanent fund. The House moved away from that model, and in this section, as in others, the House had live appropriations in this bill. The change in subsection C that you have made is to reflect that you, as a Senate, have appropriated funding for economic development in section G302 of your budget. And so your version of H159 cross-references those sections and those amounts that are actually appropriated in the budget bill. Consequently, you have a $2 million appropriation to tourism and marketing. And then you are prescribing that those allocations be 1.25 for promoting travel, recreation, etc. And then 750,000 for the grant program to increase consumer spending at local businesses, etc. In D, you wanted to make sure that the marketing of these dollars and the marketing programs themselves were targeted broadly, including underrepresented communities and new and diverse communities of visitors to Vermont. And you wanted to report February of next year on the use and outcomes of the funding. Any questions?
No,
No,
Okay. The next piece, the technology-based economic development, this is the part that kind of ties in a few different concepts, one being the federal SBIR and STTR grant programs for technology-based businesses trying to, get investment approval for new technologies. And then also the corollary or the other component of that is the UVM Office of Engagement and leveraging the services and the capabilities of the university to help businesses of a similar vein. So it is a bit different from the House. You have $800,000 in the budget going to ACCD rather than to UVM for technology-related grants. And you wanted to be sure the agency allocates funds to promote these businesses. And they are tied in this case to COVID-19 because these are also ARPA funds. The SBIR and STTR matching grants, you have the same construct as the House. You also have the Industry Research Partnership Program to help small businesses purchase technical assistance and other services from universities and research institutions, but also sort of build and be the relationships in the ecosystem of technological development and cultivation of these types of businesses.
can I ask you a question about that? I know, I'm guessing that part of the language above about making this COVID related is important to the ARPA, right, Senator Clarkson?
Yes.
ARPA. The,
good work, Chair.
I'm trying,
You're good work. Good work. You're doing brilliantly.
Is some of this money in SBIR and STTR going to businesses that have sort of yet to start? And how could you make a claim that they're COVID related?
I think these are initial stage business. These are businesses that are already started, but that need to really need investment to ratchet it up. It was my sense of the testimony, and that these are grants that are not low hanging fruit because they're hard to apply for, hence the need for technical assistance, but that these are companies that are doing well enough and have a good enough product that the ACCD and UVM, everybody feels are worth, that are strong candidates for these federal grants. And they're existing companies. They're startups in that they are not yet huge companies, but they're going concerns, or you couldn't apply, I don't think.
So you're saying that these companies could say that the pandemic got in our way of moving forward and we can use this additional help.
That's my understanding. We could clarify that. Obviously, I am not.
This came from the House. They had this funded with ARPA money as well, right, David?
Right. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I had to step away for a second. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
We're glad you can step away and get the answer wherever you went.
I went to my window to throw it open because I'm burning up.
Okay.
Oh, it's a lovely day. Actually, it's a lovely spring.
So I think it's a good question, Mr. Chair. Yeah, but there was some discussion about whether this should be ARPA eligible, and the guidance throughout this section and from JFO and from the folks looking at what we know about ARPA was that we could use that source of funds to help these kinds of businesses if they can demonstrate that they have suffered some sort of economic harm due to COVID. As with the CARES Act, it's pretty broad discretion on the state's part of how to tailor business assistance programs,
Right,
but there just does need to be some nexus.
okay. That answers my question.
And Mr. Chair, just an update. I've asked Sarah to get us the answers to the questions by 9:30.
Okay. Let's go on.
To UVM, top of page 4. To Office of Engagement.
Yep. So I think you guys have put a little more shape on this, on what money they get and what they use it for. Again, that $1 million is in the budget. It's to complete the startup of the Office of Engagement. And as the House said, it's for a 2-year period to leverage the services and data science capabilities of the university. We have this same tie-in to ARPA here. Because, and the reason that it's repeated, because remember, all of this money used to be going to UVM, but you
Right.
guys changed those allocations. So there'll be one going to the agency and another going to UVM, and they're separate.
So this is always the danger of going through a bill again, because you forget why we made certain changes, and some of the same questions come up. And I know we try to consolidate language that was sort of in 2 sections before. Even on the Office of Engagement, it was in 2 sections. But is there an inherent conflict in B saying, oh, I see. Okay. So the $1 million is in the budget and it's identified there as completing the startup of the office engagement. And now we're saying of
Yes.
the $1 million, the university should say the $1 million appropriated.
Yeah, you could say that.
Because I don't understand whether they're supposed to use this money to complete the startup or to help fund these businesses.
So I understand that it's kind of a quirky language construct, and the reason being, remember that, so if you went to A9 right now, it would say $1 million is appropriated to the University of Vermont to complete the startup of the Office of Engagement, period. And so we're saying that money referenced as such in A9, we want you to actually use it for this, or
Right.
or,
So we need to
it's really
change.
a reference.
Yeah, we need to change it a little bit then. At
Yeah,
the very least, we got to get rid of.
So the way I've done it in other places, say,
Yeah, that looks good
$1 million
already. I like the way you're thinking.
Who are you speaking to, David?
David, yeah,
We hope you like the way all of us are thinking.
I do. So,
But I agree, because you're tying 2 objectives together in one very long sentence.
that's because the Appropriations Committee wrote it the way they did. So he's trying to cross-reference that, but now we
Right,
want
I
to
understand.
be more specific.
The word "and" is always useful for a news. It's like,
The funds, so use the
yeah,
funds.
you need to add
Those
the,
funds. Okay,
so use the funds for a 2-year and to promote. How about? Can't we use and to promote tech-based businesses?
if you want to.
Well,
I don't care. I think it says the same thing.
Maybe it's, I
No, I don't think.
don't always start
I
with a
don't
clean
think it's
slate.
I don't
So
think
I'm trying to synthesize language that originally came from the agency with language that then came from the House with language that then came from appropriations, which language that you guys want to change, and try to keep a little bit of everybody's DNA in the fabric, but it doesn't always work.
No, it's a challenge.
Well, yeah, I think this probably does it. I mean, I think essentially we have several purposes here for the money, and we're just trying to lay out consolidate them into one sentence. They're not distinct spending. They're all one thing. We're just defining it with three different qualifiers, I guess. Unless you're now adding on line 5, a new category. Can't we take all these three concepts and combine them and say, that's the people who should get help? Which,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I would have to just spend a couple of minutes with.
Let's
let's not do this by committee. Let
Let's
David
let
work
David
on it
do
and come
it.
back to us. Well, we could probably take a 5-minute break somewhere and he can come back to that.
let's keep moving. It's a big 40 pages now.
So we have C1 and C2 are just the reports, and C2 is the addition of a distinct duty of UVM to report on its funding stream and outcomes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the CTE, we've punted out the dates, which we hope works for everybody.
David, why
All
don't you continue on? Okay.
Yep. So the RFP would be September 1st of 22. And then the reporting piece is a little bit expanded so that the April date is, what is your thinking? How's it going on the RFP and the stakeholder engagement process? What are you thinking? What's that going to look like? Then the January 23 is the preliminary status as of that date. And then the final is December 23. So.
And we did this again because the agency said they didn't have the bandwidth to do it sooner.
Well, a little bit that, but what I heard more was that the partners themselves who would be potentially responsible for an integrated post-secondary system are in extreme flux, in particular the state colleges, but also to a lesser extent, the adult tech centers, and that their operations and organization need to normalize as much as possible before they start contemplating how to design the whole system.
Thank you for that. Okay, let's move on.
That $75,000 is from their existing budget, but
Yeah.
The Better Places, there's still lots of house findings that are unchanged.
Good.
That takes us to page 10 to the crowd granting. And I know you guys talked a lot about the different levers here. It does create the program and the fund in statute, but later on you have added a prospective repeal. Public space is unchanged, design eligibility, all of that, but you guys changed the minimum amount of the grant to, the maximum amount of the grant from 50 to 30,000. And you also changed the match requirement from crowdfunding to 33% of the grant award.
Right.
Okay.
Which is. It was originally more like a quarter, right, David? And we raised it up to a third.
I think it
Is
was,
that-
wasn't it 25 to 50%? There was
It
a
was
range.
between 25 and 50.
So it was a range and we put a minimum of a third in.
Yeah. And I think we found out also from Chris Cochran that the other states that have done this have required a much higher
Right.
matching grant from crowdsourcing.
So your Senate budget has $1 million in it. It's actually appropriated in the budget bill to the agency. So here you're basically directing the agency to put it into the new fund and give grants pursuant to the program you're creating.
Okay.
And then you'll see the program and the fund are repealed July 1st, 23. And then there will be a report, 2 reports, both 22 and 23, on the activities, the grants, partner resources, measurable economic activity, et cetera, if any.
Yeah. Great. And now we go to Montreal.
So those are findings, intent, in section 10 unchanged. You know, it is that language is important because the money refers back to it, and it's basically the recognition that, you know, the significance of the trade relationship, but also, you know, as you'll see here, it's really, and also the recognition that this is beginning the work of cultivating relationships and attracting businesses, and it's intended to be a 2-year deal where we set things up and see how it goes at that point.
Right.
So you did give the money, you did appropriate the money, $300,000 in your Senate budget, up to 2-year contracts. And then next January, they would come back and tell you the terms and what success would look like, how we would evaluate whether this is working or not. And then on January of 23, the report would be, I mean, to the extent there are any, the type and number of business contacts and the engagement, type of business jobs, wages brought to the state, and recommendations concerning the continuation or expansion of that program or the termination.
And this is general fund, as is the seed money, seed capital money. I guess
That's
the
correct.
powers that be felt they couldn't do it under ARPA.
That's correct. Okay, so, you know, here's the piece about the different.
Can I just read? I'm sorry, I'm stuck
Okay,
on
so let me just do a time check here. We're going to try, we have theoretically till 10, but we want to save a little bit of time for Sarah Buxton's thing. And so we need to, David probably has a better sense of this bill than anybody. So keep that in mind, how fast you want to proceed, David, okay?
Sure. Well,
That's code for hurry up.
I mean, I can make this really quick. Senator Rahm, did you have a question on that piece?
Is that okay?
Yes.
It's pretty quick, but I don't want to, we don't have to noodle on it here, but I'm stopping my video because I feel like I'm freezing. I just kind of want a but-for clause around the Canadian job, that not just this, like how many contacts they had and how many jobs came to the state, but kind of, but for this position, would any of this have happened?
Let's not noodle on it right now. I mean, you're
Yeah.
talking about in the reporting requirement back. I mean, we're not stopping the contract, or we're not making a requirement of everything they do be a but for, but we can, we could, there's still a conference committee. If that makes sense, we
Yeah.
might be able to put that in.
That's fine.
Okay.
All right, so where we were is the language about the state college grants. And again, this is just intent and purpose. And then
Yeah.
the money was all in the budget. It's the same with micro business. I wanted to kind of lump these together. I mean, at this point, you've put all the money in the budget, and the micro business changes that you'll see on your screen really are just trying to make sure that the language here harmonizes with what you have in the budget. But as far as the state college grants and the micro business piece of this bill, they don't really do anything at this point because the functional stuff and the money moved over to the budget bill. So you can leave them here as a reference, as a placeholder, or you could take them out. Doesn't matter. It's up to you.
Well, on the state colleges, there's not the degree of detail on the money as this has, right? This doesn't really detail the amount of money. It just gives some intent, purpose.
Yeah, I mean, the real reason that this language was created was to make sure that there was a link between COVID and the expansion of these grant and scholarship opportunities, because it's $21 million of ARPA funds, or it was when it left the House. So the whole purpose of the facts and the background and the intent and the purpose are to demonstrate that COVID has caused people to stop pursuing their degrees or from being able to afford to pursue their degrees, and we're trying to get them back into school.
Right.
Mr. Chair, just a question. What happens if H 439 changes during the remainder of the session? And what happens to the numbers that are contained in this bill that are linked to that?
Well, so there actually aren't any numbers on this piece. If there is in all the other sections, it's a very fair question. And ultimately, part of the dance is harmonizing this bill with the budget bill.
Well, Senator Brock raises a good question. I mean, there's also the potential of a veto here, and everything could change. But are we making a mistake here in terms of specifying the dollar amounts as opposed to just referencing? There's so many different ways this could go. I mean, we could reference like the stuff on tourism. We can say of the amount. No, you can't have it both ways. Yeah, it just has to play out. It's part of the dance, and they have to get coordinated in the end.
Well, I guess that's really my question of how
I expect that there will be a change. I do. You're right. But I think we're the Senate, and we have to pass this bill based on the budget that we passed.
Right.
And so if, for instance, using tourism as an example, if they go back to 2.5, then this bill will have to be somehow changed as well to reflect.
Well, that's again, my question is really as much a process question of recognize that these would be out of sync. And the question is, how does this bill get back in sync? What's the mechanic?
It's the right question. It's the exact right question, but I mean, the answer is this is how it happens every single year. I mean, we'll be sitting in the conference committee on the economic development bill, and somebody will walk in and say, your number just changed from 2 to 1.75. And so now I have to email with Steph and with, Catherine or Maria and Steve, and we just kind of keep a running thing going of where everything is.
But you're right.
A little bit, you have to just trust me. I know that's not a lot of comfort.
That's exactly right. It's a good question, and the answer really is in detail what David said, but it does work itself out. It happens every year. There has to be
But
some.
we don't usually have such so many different moving parts that have to be coordinated. But it does always somehow work out. Although it's just incumbent on us to keep on top of it. Quite honestly,
It is also
Very comforting.
it's also a philosophical question every year about whether bills other than the budget should have live appropriations in them. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. This year, they don't. And so the coordination is more complicated for sure.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's keep going if we can.
All right. So the state BIPOC business development is the same in A, and I believe in B. So for C, you budgeted 150,000 for outreach and technical assistance and to fund service contracts, but you in this committee are expanding that to be one or more contractors so that it could, be multiple facilitators.
Can you go back for a second? I thought we had budgeted $150,000 for this contract, but does that say to provide outreach and technical assistance?
So again, this is the same issue. I'm referring to the way that the budget
Oh,
wrote
okay,
it.
okay.
So, it just said $150,000 to provide outreach and technical assistance for BIPOC-owned businesses, period.
And then
you
they
guys are
amplifying it.
so here you're saying take that money and do all this actually with it.
Right. We're
Yeah,
qualifying
I think we need to make the change here as well, because this could be read to say, of this money appropriated, you shall do what the Appropriations Committee said, and then we want to spend it all on this contracting process, and they could potentially spend less on the contracting process and give some of this money. If we don't clarify it better, I think they could technically, I think they know what we want to do, but they could technically say that we can give some of this money out to BIPOC businesses directly now, or to provide technical assistance directly to BIPOC businesses.
Well, you could say then, and will provide funding from one or more contractors. And it uses the word shall, so they've got to do this.
Okay, let's. Perfect.
Yeah,
Let's
perfect.
go on.
All right. Let's see, 9:30. I'm going to go even faster. All right. Contract work will begin by October 15th. Each contractor will have to follow all the rules. The collection of data for both Secretary of State and OPR. OPR is in the Secretary of State's office, but they have the different function of regulating entities. The new language in blue is to ensure that any process is voluntary, and that, when, as you guys discussed, when you're collecting this data, I want to make sure it happens in a way that doesn't either, have any effect or have any perception of causing any effect on any decision made or any action taken by the secretary or by the office. Okay, that's it for that one. The capital fund, there was 900,000 of general funds referencing that. So we got rid of Fast Capital, that moniker. Coordinate with Vita. You guys deleted the including BIPOC and women from the Board of Advisors piece. You added the reports on how to coordinate with Vita loan recipients, and then also the outcomes of that piece of the program. New relocating remote is the same way it left the Senate in S62. It's been folded in here. Capital investment grants, I think we talked a lot about, you know that one. That's $11 million.
Mr. Chair, for the record, even though we're not getting to it immediately, I want you to know Sarah Buxton responded on time, which was really kind of her in the middle of another meeting.
Okay,
So-
we're almost to her section, so,
Yeah, no, I just forwarded you all her response.
okay, great, thank you.
Via email.
And you guys settled on this position of the 500,000, is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I expressed my opinion. Senator Brock and Senator Clarkson expressed theirs. A part of my thinking is that I'm assuming there will be pressure from the House, and I'm not wedded to this number in conference, but it is the beginning of a $66 million program. And the first grants probably won't go out till the New Year's, and we'll be back here in January. Whatever we come down with, I think we'll have a better idea of how big we want to go, how many of these projects are. I don't disagree with some of the arguments that have been made, but my comfort level is at this level at this point. So that's my point. If folks want to push back, they can. And we could take a vote on it if we want on that. But as I said, open to a bigger number and expect there probably will be in conference, but I don't want to start out with a bigger number right now.
I have articulated my position. So I'm hoping transformational will mean transformational and a larger number will emerge during the process.
I don't know if this makes the pro tem a tiebreaker, but I tend to agree with the chair that I'd rather see, us get a reasonable amount of money. It's not nothing to more projects. And see, what we learn. This is going to be less for some folks, plenty for, regional projects in our more rural, not plenty, but a good amount for rural parts of the state. So I'd rather leave the number where it is.
Well, and I'm not sure that Senator Ballin would be a tiebreaker. I don't see her online right now, but I think I heard Senator Clarkson, there she is, say that
I just rejoined. I was meeting with Boomer.
despite her misgivings, she's putting her faith in the process. So,
The one thing I'd like to add, because as you know, I would like this to be much higher. The one thing I would like to make clear is that if a transformational, a major project gets one of these smaller amounts in this first tranche, that they are able to come back and reapply. Because if these are truly transformational regional projects, these are going to be projects between $10 and $30 million, if not more. So $500,000 may be helpful on some.
I'm willing to do that, and I'm actually willing to do it before it leaves this committee.
Yes, I'd like to make sure.
Put something like notwithstanding, nothing in this section is meant to prohibit additional grants, assuming there's additional funding down the road, but not necessarily out of this first 11 million. So they could come back in subsequent grants. Senator Ballin, you okay with where we are?
Mr. Chair, I missed most of that because I was meeting with Bloomer about some
Okay.
parliamentary things. And
Okay.
so I think I got.
I could just briefly, I think we have at least a majority position on leaving the maximum grant of these capital investments at 500,000, knowing that we'll probably get some pressure in conference to raise that number. Okay.
Well, there's also the question, I think, from my mind, as to our limitation to this as effectively a small business grant. And if the goal overall of all of this is economic development, I wonder why we would limit ourselves in such a way. Again, whether or not a notwithstanding might be appropriate.
So are you now are you still on the same issue, or are you moving on to 20 or more locations and
Yeah,
public?
I'm at that. That's where I am.
Yeah. Well, that was suggested by the agency. I looked at that and said, God, there's probably very few businesses in the state of Vermont that have 20 or more locations. But then I was thinking that they're probably talking nationally. So, if you're talking about a big chain or something that's domiciled in Vermont, that they probably couldn't qualify. I'm not wedded to that. I'd like to hear a little bit more from the agency in their defense. I don't think they put up a very good defense, quite frankly, said Brock. They just said that's what SBA does, so that's not necessarily, but I'd like to hear more about it before I take it out. But I am.
I'd certainly be willing to listen to more, but in my mind, the goal is not the nurturing of small business. The goal is economic development.
And transformational at economic.
Exactly.
I mean, big.
So you're saying
industries or Joe and Charlie's bicycle shop.
So you're saying basically, if Global Foundries came in and say, we have a great idea that can produce something, we could give them 500,000 or $1 million, wherever we wind up on, even though they're just a bazillion dollar company, we want to use some of these dear dollars to help them. Is that what you're saying? In principle, yes. Okay.
We want to use the dear dollars to help us.
Okay.
That's the goal, is to help us, not them.
Okay. We will continue that discussion. I'll try and reach out to Joan. Could we just move on? I think we're near the end.
Yep. Well, so we have those issues and timely manner, data modeling, commerce, interagency team, factors, monitoring, reports, the ERGs. Are you good with shifting over to net adjusted loss here?
Yeah, let's just do it. That's what Joan
that
wants.
Since,
I think we sort of spent a lot of time on this yesterday, so if there's no changes.
that's it.
That. Okay, let's go to the apprenticeship.
Okay, so with the apprenticeship, we have Sarah's responses. And I'm just going to read you what she says. She says it will be administratively difficult to determine if a small electrical employer is not bringing on new apprentices because they can't afford the $900 tuition, or for another reason, challenging to apply a but-for inquiry. Employers can already seek advancement grants on behalf of their new employees, and we would come after that. We want to be sure that spaces are made available for new apprentices who express interest. And the second response is, since the funding is only for reimbursement for of actual costs incurred, I think $750 should be fine. It could be simpler, however, to just allow reimbursement for books, supplies, equipment, and tools as an allowable use of the big pot of funds, with a caveat that it should be for actual costs incurred by the participant, meaning the employer isn't paying for it anyway. I want to note that these funds would only be spent when a participant is enrolled in an apprenticeship program, contract signed, which means they're already employed or about to start on the job. We administer this system already with WIOA.
Okay, So here's my suggestion. We asked David to change C to aspirational language, and then we leave 750 in and continue to look at it if we want to refine it later. Are people okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So do you want to change that, David, and come back to us in like 10 minutes? Is that okay?
That works.
And you had one other change you were working on. I don't know if you
Yeah, I'm
finished
just
it.
going to take a quick look at each of those cross references to the budget and make sure they're not hurting more than they're helping. Do you know what I mean? So it's just very specific that X person shall use the dollars appropriated in this subdivision to Y.
Okay. All right, let's come back at 9:50 or 51 and we'll do a straw poll and we'll go to the floor.